Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Medical Myths, the show about what not to do with your body. And today we're talking about a continuation of the topic of last week because I was going to address this during the fake medical boards video, but now we're covering it separately. And I'm kind of glad that we are because this one deserves a lot of its own attention. And we'll even probably go into some other related groups depending on time. But today we're talking about hate groups disguised as medical organizations. And there's one in particular that is on my mind constantly, and that is the American College of Pediatricians. And this is not to be confused with the American Academy of Pediatrics. That is a medical organization. It's not a board, it's not the board of pediatricians, it's not the board of pediatrics, but it is essentially a lobbying group to promote the stances of the majority of pediatricians, kind of convey the consensus of pediatrics, and help drive policy changes accordingly. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has been in favor of things like gender affirming care. It is in favor of things like abortion rights for everybody. So it's easy to look at an organization like the American Academy of Pediatrics and say, wow, they're very progressive. And yeah, because if you follow the logic and you follow the data related to transgender care and gender affirming medicine, LGBTQ rights, pro choice rights, you're going to end up being more progressive because that's what the data is showing. But with that, you have some fringe groups of doctors who do not agree with the data and who usually have some religious bias and political bias that they try to stand for. So this other board, it's not even a board, this other lobbying group, the American College of Pediatricians, it sounds legitimate. It sounds like they know what they're talking about, but this is a hate group. And I'm not using that term lightly. This is primarily a group to stomp out rights of people that they don't like. And we're going to look at their Twitter page first before we go into their website, because I think I don't have to do much debunking of what they're saying because they are very explicit about their stances. But the scary thing is these people are giving money to the government and trying to they're trying to make changes in legislation. They are trying to get their lawmakers to make laws accordingly and saying that they have the scientific basis to back up their claims. So here's their Twitter page for the American College of Pediatricians, and their kind of mission statement in their bio here is protecting the child, preserving the family, and honoring life. Hashtag best for children. And that sounds nice, right? It sounds like it is a productive organization that just wants children to be happy and healthy. They want kids to have families and they want people to be alive. And just looking at the statement, you might think, yes, this probably is the best thing for children. But what do they mean by each of these points here? Protecting the child. They're saying, well, I mean, we'll get into their stances on what they believe is protecting the child. Preserving the family. They are going to reference a lot of the nuclear family and traditional family roles, and honoring life. This is a very pro-life organization, and you can even kind of see some of the pictures on the side here, but they have a very religious bias in this organization. But they made a post for National Doctors Day, which is just a couple days ago, and they say, please consider supporting the doctors of the American College of Pediatricians who work tirelessly to protect medical conscience rights, biological integrity, and every human life, which I was curious about what they meant by biological integrity. And if you Google biological integrity, you get some some interesting definition from kind of and like an ecology stance. So they're kind of taking this word and they're not using it in the way that it is actually defined. Um, because the definition that I can see is biological integrity is the ability of an ecosystem to support and maintain a balanced, adaptive community of organisms having a species composition, diversity, and function comparable to that of a natural habitat. So this is like an ecology related term, but they're taking this to try to. I'm not even sure if they're trying to use this for anti-LGBT reasons or if they're trying to use this for specifically anti-abortion reasons. I don't know which particular claim they're trying to lump in with biological integrity. It sounds, in the case that they're using this, it sounds very eugenicsy, I guess. It sounds like they have a very particular definition of what is biologically normal, and they want to keep humanity as biologically normal as possible. That's what it sounds like to me from this standpoint, although they're using a term that doesn't even have close to a medical definition. So I'm a little bit confused there. Medical conscience rights is again a vague term. I don't even know what this is supposed to mean. Maybe I can Google a definition as well for medical conscience rights. It seems like they're just word salading to sound like they have good ideas. Medical conscience rights. Oh, okay. Here's what they mean. No, this makes sense. Okay. Federal statutes protect healthcare provider conscience rights and prohibit recipients of certain federal funds from discriminating against healthcare providers who refuse to participate in certain services based on moral objections or religious beliefs. So, okay, so this makes sense. They're lobbying for doctors to be able to refuse to provide gender affirming care and refuse to provide abortions. And that they should not be discriminated against for doing so. And this can be really scary because your right to deny somebody care. I mean, you do have these rights to decline to perform whatever procedure. And like, let's take this from my standpoint of like I absolutely oppose circumcision, routine infant circumcision. I oppose it. And so if somebody came to me and said, I really, really want my child to be circumcised, under medical conscience rights, I would be able to say, I don't want to perform this procedure, and I have every right to not perform that procedure. But I'm still obligated as a physician to refer them to somebody who will do that for them. And it sounds terrible. I of course, don't want people to have these procedures done. But in order to respect patients' autonomy and respect their wishes for their lives and their families' lives, you have to be willing to refer out for that. And so, even though I can say I have a pretty convincing ethical stance for not being in favor of circumcision, if you allowed me to make that decision to just refuse this person care and not give them care elsewhere, then that opens the door for these organizations like the American College of Pediatricians to say, well, I also don't need to refer you out because I don't want to provide you gender affirming care and I don't have to send you anywhere else. Like it, we have to compromise a little bit on that point so that they don't get to uh, take their position to its full extent. So, yeah, that's what they mean here by medical conscience rights. And every human life they're referring to in utero, they're referring to fetuses, and they're very, very explicitly pro-life. So then their next post here says there is no evidence that transgender interventions are safe for children. On the contrary, interventions are linked to physical and mental harm. To learn the facts, check out the link below, which I'm actually going to click on this link, and we're eventually going to read this because they're very wrong about this. The science does not back them up. The interventions for the transgender interventions are all interventions that are utilized for other medical conditions, and they are safe in children of that same age or younger. So the fact is, when people say that puberty blockers are not safe for children, that is demonstrably not true, because we've used puberty blockers and continue to use them for children with precocious puberty. And that's often done ages 6, 7, anything under 8. If you're starting puberty, younger than 8, you are having precocious puberty and would be probably put on a puberty blocker. And they're not coming after kids with precocious puberty. They're not claiming that that's unsafe. They're just claiming it's unsafe for trans kids. So they are just limiting evidence-based medicine for a subset of the population. This falls under the fact is, with trans kids having higher suicide risk, calling for this kind of thing is, and to not use the word loosely, this is genocidal rhetoric. They are wanting to eliminate trans people, and they didn't say those specific words here, but denying the trans community medical care, especially denying children evidence-based medical care, is genocidal. You're going to result in the deaths of children, and the deaths of these children as a result of this rhetoric by the American College of Pediatricians, the blood is on their hands. This is unacceptable. And you all in my audience know how unacceptable this is. You all have heard these arguments ad nauseum. Like, I get so many messages every day of people asking me how to debunk things like this. And it never ends. But the arguments are all the same. We go through the data, we take the studies that suggest that there is no harm in the long run, at least no significant harm in the long run from using these interventions. And even if it's done on children, just because a child is now in the mix does not suddenly mean that the standards of care are somehow magically higher. The standard of medicine has always been, like, it's always the same. It's the same for everybody. And but I think people are emotionally connected when you start throwing children into this mix. And there's that whole conversation about consent. And no, children's brains are not well developed until early adulthood, but it's not a decision that only children are making. This is a decision made by the parents and by the clinical team. And so it's not the child consenting on their own. It is the medical team's decision. They've made their diagnosis. They've determined that the risks and benefits, the risks are outweighed by the benefits of receiving this care. And it is a collaborative decision by adults. So that's not a good argument to oppose this. And we went a little bit on a tangent there, but we will get back into their whole trans argument in a little bit. I just want to show a few more tweets before we switch over to the website. So this one's interesting. So they had a whole show, and this is from a supposedly legitimate medical organization. And the language that they're using here is the evil of gender ideology. So they're throwing around dog whistles to call in people to oppose trans people. And they have a pediatric endocrinologist who has witnessed firsthand the medical and political landscape around gender dysphoria become increasingly dangerous. And a person here on this episode is a clergyman. This is a clergy member being represented in this video by the American College of Pediatricians. Which, if you are a legitimate medical organization, you should not be making religious statements. You should not be backed by a religious organization. That should not be who you're allying with. Medicine is secular and always should be. Everybody should have access to medicine, and everybody should be able to receive care. So when you restrict this kind of thing to one particular religious sect, you are asserting your own ideology as the most medically legitimate. And what about the children who are Muslim? What about the children who are Hindu? What about children who are atheists? Like, there are children, obviously, of all different backgrounds, and saying that your children from your background are the only ones that matters uh, is hateful. Yeah, there's no such thing as transgender ideology except in the heads of haters. Exactly. And this is a hate group, and we're seeing, as we keep going, just more and more evidence that this is not a medical organization. This is just a hate group masquerading as a medical organization. And again, they go into youth transition is experimental, using that buzzword to make you think that that doctors don't know what they're talking about, and they're not showing data, which is interesting. In any of these articles that they're posting from their own website, there's no data to back up their claims. They have no citations listed. If you go to an organization like the AMA or the AAFP, or any of the legitimate medical lobbying groups, for every claim that they make, they will cite studies, at least more than one study, to justify their stance on a particular issue. These people are not doing that. It's just buzzwords and dog whistles. And they say that they've got a giant zero. There are zero long-term studies that demonstrate the safety of puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries for gender dysphoric youth. And we already addressed why that's poor logic. But I want to see if they have any. Oh, they have one here about want to know the truth about chemical abortion. ACPEDS has resources. Check out all of the facts below, and we're going to go into that paper as well. Oh, and right underneath it, they quote Pope Francis. Pope Francis says gender ideology is one of the most dangerous ideological colonizations, which funny, it's kind of hilarious to me that they're going to say that this is colonialism, says the Catholic Church. Yeah, the Catholic Church really good about calling out colonialism, because they're definitely not. They definitely have never been proponents of colonization of the world for Catholicism. But it's funny, yeah. Every post that they've made is a confession of their own ideas. Yeah, well, if the Pope says it, and why are you citing the Pope for a medical organization? And we know why, because this isn't a medical organization. This is a pseudo medical organization just trying to push their conservative ideas on everybody else and saying that is scientifically backed. So let's go to their website. All right. So again, they say enabling all children to reach their optimal physical and emotional health and well-being. And I kind of want to learn more about what they mean by that. Let's go. The American College of Pediatricians is a national organization of pediatricians and other healthcare professionals dedicated to the health and well-being of children. So they're so vague. It's really funny because they get you with this phrase. Like, if you get any medical professional coming in here, or even lay people coming to the website saying, "Oh yeah, well, I think it's a good idea to support the health and well-being of children. So, you know what? I'm going to go support this organization." And if they don't read anything else on this website and they go donate and give them money, they just missed out on the key tenets of this organization. And I'm sure they mislead a lot of people by using the statement alone. I think if they were more proud of their stances, they would explicitly list them in their mission statement, but they don't. They keep it vague and make you have to dig through their papers to find out what they're about. So their objectives are to foster and stimulate improvements in all aspects of healthcare of infants, children, and adolescents. See, funny enough, that's exactly what I want to do in medicine. We have very different ideas on how we get there because the data shows that the best way to foster and stimulate improvements in all aspects of healthcare of infants, children, and adolescents is to have them in a safe environment, have them affirmed for who they are, to have parents who love them, whether that be heterosexual parents, homosexual parents, um, any combination of the above could be a a good household for these kids. Fostering education, education on diversity, education on sexual health, um, improving rights for all people, the ability to make decisions for your own body, teaching kids that they should have the ability to make decisions for their own bodies is what should be supported. However, that's not what they mean by improvements here. To promote the basic father mother family unit as the optimal setting for childhood development while pledging to support all children regardless of their circumstances. So they're asserting the traditional nuclear family as the optimal setting for children, and they're pledging to support all children, which is funny because they're saying to support all children, but they're not going to support LGBTQ children. They're going to claim to support them while promoting action to detransition them and convert them to heterosexual, regardless of their circumstances. So basically, taking away children from households without this basic mother father family unit. So worsening the lives of children, providing them less access to safety and care, removing their health care. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely supporting all aspects of healthcare for children. To affirm that parents have the inalienable right and responsibility to educate and rear their children. I would agree that parents have the responsibility to educate their children. However, you do not have full rights to do whatever you want to your children. We know this with cases of child abuse. We don't want children to be left in households that are abusive, and we will take away your children if you abuse them. So it seems like they're advocating for child abuse here, except they'll advocate kind of subtly for child abuse, for the inalienable right to respond and responsibility to educate and rear their children. So you can beat your kids, you can abuse your kids, but we'll take away your kids from you if you're not meeting the mother father family unit. So a distorted view on what is a good environment for a child. And here I can zoom in. This is really small on your end. Here we go. To advocate for children at all stages of development from conception to young adulthood. So they oppose abortion. To cultivate and encourage parental responsibility for and involvement in the children's life. And I guess going back to number 4, because the other point is they advocate for children at all stages from conception to young adulthood. But what if this is a young adult or even uh, a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old who gets pregnant and you don't support the right to an abortion? So it seems like you're prioritizing fetal development above the life of that young adult or that 10-year-old or that 9-year-old that you've condemned to possibly carrying to term and possibly killing them by carrying them to term. So in saying this, anytime that you're going to assert that fetuses from conception have equal rights to those of young adults or children, you're forcing people to prioritize whose life is more important. And that's what you're doing. You are forcing a trolley problem of, if you are going to adopt this perspective, who are you going to prioritize? You have a fetus and you have a 9-year-old. Whose life are you saving? And oftentimes these people, I mean, they're not going to explicitly say it right off the bat because I think they know that it's an ethical dilemma, and they'll backpedal and they'll say why this isn't a trolley problem. But oftentimes they're going to choose the fetus, and by the laws that they're trying to pass and advocating for, they are choosing the fetus. They don't have to explicitly say in words that they are prioritizing one life or another. They are communicating this with their actions. By passing those laws, by lobbying in this way, you are prioritizing one life or another. And we have a super chat in the side chat. Thank you, RPG Debunks, $5, saying, here's my support for the future. Not a student anymore, Dr. Ben. Hashtag coming down the home stretch. Thank you for your support. It's amazing to have you all here. And yeah, my name is now almost Dr. Ben because we are 17 days away. And yeah, HR makes a really good point that unfortunately Christianity has quite a hold on the foster care system. Which is true, yeah. So they're advocating for improving all aspects of children's healthcare and children's lives in general. But then they are forcing people to go through birth. They're encouraging children to be taken away from their families who are LGBT, and then putting them into this foster care system that cannot sustain the lives of these children. So it just seems like they're prioritizing certain lives. They're prioritizing Christian children's lives. They're prioritizing straight children's lives. They're prioritizing fetal lives. They don't care about LGBTQ children. They don't care about children who have good families that are queer. And they'd rather see those kids from queer families in a broken foster care system than see them in a happy home with two dads or two moms. Yeah, intersex kids. They don't care about intersex kids. They want to and going back to their statements of they are claiming that there's no long-term data on the safety of surgery for trans kids, but then they support forced surgery for intersex kids to make them more aligned with what is normal. And like, so if I come out and I say, which this is, like, we have evidence to back up that it is detrimental to forcibly surgically assign intersex children to a body. And we have no evidence of that. But if I said, hey, we actually know the long-term harm. We have evidence of long-term harm for these kids. So we shouldn't do these surgeries in childhood. And they would probably say, well, but that's different. That's different because they were broken to begin with, which is horrible. Horrible that people think that intersex children are abnormal or diseased. And furthermore, I haven't mentioned this yet, but a very important point again is that we're not doing surgeries on children. I mean, it's debatable people getting top surgery at age 16, but age 16 is already a consensually sticky age group anyway, because at age 16, you're able to consent to, like, if you get pregnant at age 16, you can consent to the healthcare of your own child. Right. So there are ways to determine maturity levels of teenagers that are validated. So we can we can properly determine when a teenager is able to make their own medical decisions, and that's a bit more sticky. But they'll take that issue, like, if you talk to somebody who says they're mutilating our children and we should not allow that, they're making you think that you're doing surgeries on babies, or you're doing surgeries on toddlers, or even elementary school age children. That's what they're making you think when they say those words. But then when you ask them what trans surgeries are being done on young children, and they'll say, "Oh, well, there was this person in who was 16 who had top surgery." And like, okay, number one, that's not a genital surgery. Number two, that's not a young child, like you were saying. And number three, we do not perform genital surgeries or even breast surgeries, because you can't do a breast surgery on a child that doesn't have breasts. We're not doing those surgeries on young children. So it's a complete straw man argument using messy language to make you think one thing that they're arguing, but actually the data they're suggesting does not support the argument they're actually advocating for. It's very messy. And so if, I guess this is a bit of a tangent, but if you're arguing with people about that particular topic with surgery, that's how you need to approach it. You need to break down every single claim that they're saying, because they will lump it all together and make you agree with that thing, that whole group of claims. Because, like, yeah, if they say I support healthcare of infants and children, like, yeah, I could agree with that. But then if you ask them to break down how do you define that, then they start smuggling in these other ideas, and which I don't agree with, and most people would not agree with. So make sure, if you are arguing against these people, that you call them out on every point. Make them back up their points. Make them give specific examples of what they're talking about, because it'll clarify that they do not have a strong position at all. We can read the rest of these pretty quickly. To engender the honest interpretation of scientific pediatric research. It's funny that they say honest when their approach is not honest. Without deference to current political persuasions. Wow, so a political lobbying group whose whole goal is to insert their political bias into medicine, saying, well, we're going to be objective and unbiased, and we're not going to defer to current political persuasions, when that's exactly what they're doing. All of these are confessions. All of their accusations are confessions. To promote the highest standards of medical practice among its members and within the field of pediatrics, to encourage and support sound, ethical, scientific research in all aspects of healthcare for infants, children, and adolescents. You know, if they did that, they would support gender-affirming care and abortion. To cooperate with other organizations having similar purposes and standards. And furthermore, principles. Recognizes that there are absolutes and scientific truths that transcend relative social considerations of the day. Which is funny, because the absolutes and scientific truth disagree with you. So I absolutely recognize that there are scientific truths that are not dependent on the social considerations. But I disagree that your claims are the ones that are the scientific truths. Recognizes that good medical science cannot exist in a moral vacuum, and pledges to promote such science. The moral vacuum argument, I agree with them. Science does not exist in a moral vacuum. But to insert religion then is not a good way to do this. Again, recognizes the fundamental mother-father-family unit within the context of marriage to be the optimal setting for the development and nurturing of children, and pledges to promote this unit. So even if you have two long-term partners that have been together for decades, but decided not to get married for whatever reason, or couldn't get married for whatever reason, and if they had a stable household and were treating the children well, That's not that's not a good family unit. That's not an optimal setting. But a mother father family unit with specifically one mother, one father that beats their child is an optimal setting because, well, at least they're not gay. Yeah, not a good take. Not a good take at all. Recognizes the unique value of every human life from the time of conception to natural death and pledges to promote research and clinical practice that provides for the healthiest outcome of the child from conception to adulthood. Yeah, the time from conception to natural death of died in childbirth. Absolutely. Died in childbirth at age 9. Love that for our society. Recognizes the essential role parents play in encouraging and correcting the child and pledges to protect and promote this role. Yeah, to an extent, that's fine. Correcting the child. I hope you're standing against child abuse. Recognizes the physical and emotional benefits of sexual abstinence until marriage and pledges to promote this behavior as the ideal for adolescents. So they're against sex ed, which we know promotes harm because people are going to have sex anyway. And having uninformed sexual relationships is going to lead to more harm. Like, none of this that they're advocating for is harm mitigation. They don't seem to care about harm mitigation. Their whole stances are opposing people that are different than them. And that is why I called them a hate group. Recognizes that health professionals caring for children must maintain a high ethical and scientific standards and pledges to promote such practice. And this group, look at this. So this is a religious group that opposes rights of other people, and they are a non-for-profit organization, and they are tax exempt. They're tax exempt, and they are lobbying and giving their money to politicians so that they can ban trans people from existing. I love our system. This is so great. This is so great that they don't have to pay taxes and can just, use that money to prevent me from existing. So let's read more about their. You know what? We talked a lot about the trans issues already, so let's go into their abortion arguments, shall we? Let's talk about chemical abortion and their stance. All right, so chemical abortions with and without medical supervision. And they're abstract. They have an abstract, so they make it look like this is a study. I want to see if they actually. This is a long paper. We won't read all of it. Oh, they actually have sources for this one. Oh, hey, a PDF version is available there, but I don't think it's any shorter. I want like the Cliff Notes version. I guess we could just read the abstract and maybe go into some of these subsections. Chemical abortions, otherwise known as medication-induced abortions, were approved by the FDA in September 2000 and now account for over 50% of abortions in the US. Yeah, they're very safe. Chemical abortions are some of the most safe ways to do this. And I do not see a problem. Like, yeah, there are risks. Absolutely. There are risks with any medical procedure that you're going to do. But having a medication abortion versus a surgical abortion is significantly less risky. And even a surgical abortion is very safe. All of these are very safe procedures. But we can make this even more safe with the medication-induced abortion. And we'll get into that. Women are being encouraged to order and carry out their own abortion without in-person supervision by healthcare professionals, contributing to increased risk of complications. Which we don't have data to suggest that this is more dangerous. And it's funny, the buzzwords they're using here are a lot of the buzzwords that we see within like the anti-GMO communities and like the anti-chemical groups that will say you should stop eating this food because it's got chemicals in it, and vaccines have chemicals in them, so therefore it's bad. They're using that same rhetoric here, even though this is a group of doctors, and they know that colloquially, chemicals and synthetic are buzzwords that scare people. This paper describes the use of synthetic chemicals to induce abortion and the complications faced by women who obtain care in a medical setting, including hemorrhage and incomplete abortions that may require surgical intervention. Which, yeah, like if you do a carry out your own abortion, and granted, we need to clarify as well kind of what the purpose is for a DIY abortion, essentially. This isn't the preferred method. Um, I think myself and most other physicians, I think the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, or ACOG, would also agree with this statement that it's not ideal to have an abortion at home not supervised by a physician. I don't think any of us would advocate for that being the gold standard. What's happening here is with the increase of banning abortion in many states, people have no choice but to do their own abortion at home. And the way to do that safely is through medication-induced abortions through mail order pharmacies. And it's not ideal, but it is, if it is the best option that people have, I'd rather they do that than use a coat hanger or some other less safe method. Or even for somebody who has a high risk pregnancy to have to carry that to term when they are not consenting to that risk. So I think we all agree that ideally, these medication induced abortions will be done under the care of a physician in a safe environment with the ability to call whoever is on call that day and say, hey, I'm going to have this done and I want to make sure I don't have complications. Or if you're doing this at home, that if you have a complication, you can call and say, hey, I'm coming in because I'm having some increased bleeding, etc. Like we all agree that better care or that more care is going to be better in this case. But this is just an emergency. This is if you cannot have access to that. Additionally, it describes the increased risks for those women who use telemedicine or the internet to obtain their chemical abortion, especially when those abortions are completed without physician supervision and are self-managed. And this is interesting too, because they're going to use an equivocation argument in this whole paper, whatever. I can't call it a study. This whole proposal, because they're going to describe primarily the risks of people who do their own abortion at home through telemedicine or through DIY. So they're going to take someone who did a DIY abortion and had complications and use that as a reason why abortion in general, or why medication-induced abortion in general, is problematic. Whereas I think if we separated the data out to here's the at-home abortions, the DIY abortions versus here's the medication-induced abortions provided in office by a physician, I think we'd see very different levels of complication risk. And they're equating these two populations together, which is problematic. And it serves their argument well for their audience. Their audience is buying into that. And especially their pro-life audience is going to say, yeah, this is dangerous. We can't stand for this. But it's a faulty argument. It's fallacious. The risks may include an undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy, Rh isoimmunization, and undiagnosed infection, which I don't know a lot of people that are going to, like, if you're having an abortion at home, sorry, not at home, if you're having an abortion medically under the care of a physician, they're probably going to do an ultrasound. I don't know many that wouldn't do an ultrasound to verify the position of the fetus and to monitor if they've expelled it or not, because you need to make sure you don't have retained products of conception. So you're going to get a TVUS or transvaginal ultrasound when you're going in for an abortion. That's part of the deal. And furthermore, this is interesting because they're not disclosing the fact that the drugs used, especially methotrexate, because the combination for a medication-induced abortion is oftentimes methotrexate and misoprostol, which these are very benign medications. The misoprostol is this one an NSAID? Yeah, misoprostol is the NSAID. So it's basically a stronger form of ibuprofen. So, like, yeah, they'll make these drugs sound very scary. And yeah, is there risk of bleeding with an NSAID? Yes, there is. There's risk of gastric ulceration with NSAIDs, but it's the same risk that you're going to get with ibuprofen or naproxen, etc. So it's a pretty benign medication. And then methotrexate it's a chemo drug and an immunosuppressive. But methotrexate is actually used to treat ectopic pregnancies at early stages. Because if you're having an ectopic that ruptures or is too large to be removed, obviously you're going to need to have surgery to remove it. But if the ectopic is small enough at a very early stage, you can use methotrexate to help expel the ectopic pregnancy, like especially if it's in the tube or if it's if it's an abdominal ectopic, you're probably going to have surgery because that's actually not in the uterus at all. But yeah, methotrexate is it's a chemo med, and yeah, it's used for arthritis and for rheumatoid arthritis specifically because it's it's for immunotherapy, so it's not used for osteoarthritis. But yeah, so they're making these drugs sound very nefarious, and they're not. These are very benign medications. The American College of Pediatricians strongly encourages healthcare professionals, policymakers, and women of all ages and their families to understand the serious risks associated with chemical abortions, especially when self-managed. Additionally, pregnant women with regrets after starting chemical abortions need to be informed about the potential for abortion pill reversal, which no. Those pills have not ever been shown to be safe or work. Don't no. Well, actually, we should do a whole episode on abortion reversal and ectopic pregnancy implantation because that's a myth that needs to die, and it's a myth that's killing people. So we'll definitely do a whole episode devoted to that. Do I even? I don't know if I want to read all of this, but we'll read their definitions and then we'll go into their examples and see what arguments they're using here for their examples. So they say that a medication abortion or medical abortion is the term used in most medical literature, as well as by Planned Parenthood, to describe those abortions induced by the use of two chemicals, mifepristone and misoprostol. Yeah, and mifepristone is another one that's often used for an abortion. You can use methotrexate too. There's a variety of. I guess now mifepristone's used more commonly, and it's a progestin. So it's basically HRT. You're giving them some HRT and some NSAIDs for this abortion. Chemical abortion is the term mainly used in this position paper, and the method is often referred to by the public as the abortion pill. Telemedicine abortion describes the prescription of chemical abortive agents without an in-person evaluation by a healthcare professional, but includes a remote interaction with the provider, usually by video. Women may or may not be required to obtain laboratory or ultrasound evaluation when utilizing telemedicine. Generally speaking, you're not going to be having an entire pregnancy managed by telemedicine alone. They're going to make sure that you're getting labs, and they're going to make sure you're getting ultrasounds. If you're going in for a telemedicine abortion, like, yeah, you might not see that particular provider in person, but they have to have options where you can go if things go south. You have to have the option, at least at minimum, to go to an emergency medicine, like an emergency room. But oftentimes they'll have ways for you to go get an ultrasound with, because they can write orders, right? Like, a lot of gynecology offices have their own ultrasounds, and I think most medical clinics now are getting access to ultrasound. But there are still imaging places that do X-rays, CTs, etc., that have sonographers that do ultrasounds, and you can submit an order as a physician, submit an order to a location near the patient that does ultrasound, and you can do that. Um, and sometimes that's even covered by the telemedicine clinic that you're going through. Self-managed abortion describes the process by which a woman may request a prescription for a chemical abortive agent via the internet. Her medical information may be reviewed by a licensed provider. Her gestational age will most often be determined solely by her last menstrual period, and she will most likely not have an in-person video appointment with the provider. And I agree with them that this is dangerous. Self-managed DIY abortion is dangerous, and at the minimum, I think people should have access to telemedicine abortion, because at least they have somebody responsible who can be held accountable for whatever happens with the pregnancy. But in cases where it is illegal, and I obviously I do not think it's safe to do this, but I hope that people that are doing DIY at least have a medical professional that they can ask questions to under the table. I know, like, it's risky. It's risky to do that kind of thing under the table, but I hope that they would have access to somebody who can at least determine uh, gestational age and can review their records and say, "Hey, I think you're high risk or low risk," or whatever. I hope that they have that access, but if they don't, this might be the only way that they can do it. Um, and that's not up to me to decide how someone's going to go about that. And the best way, the single best way to improve safety of abortion and to reduce incidence of self-managed abortion and self-managed abortion complications is to legalize abortion and to give everybody access to it. If you let providers provide abortions, then they don't need to do it on their own. They don't need DIY. They don't need to have that risk. They can go to somebody who can do it safely. And that should be, if they are really advocating for everybody's health and well-being, that's the way to do it. That is objectively the correct way to go about making it safer. Because what you're going to do is as you're opposing medication abortions, as you're opposing access, all you're doing is contradicting your own argument here. All you're doing is forcing more people to go the DIY route. So it's really just asserting their own points of view and not really caring about the consequences. But we all know that their goal at the end of the day is not actually to help all people and all children. It's to help the ones that they deem to be normal which is disgusting. Chemical abortion side effects. Yeah, bleeding, cramping, abdominal pain are commonly associated with chemical abortion. I mean, yeah, we don't pretend that it's without risk. And approximately 8% of women will experience bleeding for more than 30 days afterwards. Yeah, people also experience a lot of bleeding after pregnancy, and that's normal. This is a consequence of like because you were pregnant and you are no longer pregnant. That's all that an abortion is. It is ending a pregnancy. And so yeah, you're gonna have some complications of what would typically happen after being pregnant and after expelling a pregnancy. Um, and any of these side effects, any of these complications could be managed by a physician who's providing the procedure, providing the medication, and can help resolve the side effects. They can treat those side effects. Like bleeding can be treated, infection can be treated, allergic reaction can be treated, retained fetal tissue can be treated by removing it, incomplete abortion can be treated by removing it. Like all of these can be eliminated by having proper abortion care. And by forcing people to go the DIY route is just forcing people to have more of these side effects. The logic here is astounding. Rare complications. Okay, so a rare, serious, and usually fatal infection with Clostridium has been associated with mifepristone. Which here's my question: like, so this is a sepsis-related bacterium, right? My thought is, yeah, so it's causing some immunosuppression, is what they're claiming, blocking glucocorticoid receptors in leukocytes, which I mean, yeah, that can happen, but this a lot of this can be mitigated by physician oversight, right? And yeah, and sepsis is a big deal. It's a big deal to have sepsis, but we can prevent sepsis by treating the sources of infection right away and making sure that people are safe when they're doing these abortions. So, I mean, it's the same thing if you were having somebody who's pregnant with a immunodeficiency. Like, and they're advocating already for people who are immunodeficient to carry pregnancy still term. Like sepsis is incredibly high risk in pregnancy in general, especially for people with miscarriages. So I'd like to see some of their stats on like the sepsis risk in these um, abortions compared to the sepsis risk in uh, in just pregnancy in general or in miscarriage. I think I might. I've gone over a lot of the arguments I had about this one. We have the trans article pulled up. Maybe I want to look at some of their other topics. Oh, let's actually, as I they actually have okay stances on COVID-19 and immunization. Do I want to go to parenting or sexuality issues of youth? Because maybe or marriage and family matters. My goodness. Let's go to marriage and family matters, and then we'll go to sexuality. So their definition of marriage is something else. So they say preserving traditional marriage and the nuclear family. And they say marriage is the state of being united to a person of the opposite sex as husband and wife in a consensual and contractual relationship recognized by law. So I agree with most of this. I disagree with their insertion of opposite sex as husband and wife as criteria for marriage. If you take that statement out and you just said marriage as a state of being united to a person in a consensual and contractual relationship recognized by law, I can get behind you there. But you smuggle this in, and now I disagree because this is just gatekeeping the institution of marriage. Marriage exists in virtually every known human society, at least since the beginning of recorded history, and all the flourishing varieties of human cultures documented by anthropologists. Marriage has been a universal human institution. As a virtually universal human idea, marriage is about regulating the reproduction of children, families, and society. Wow, okay. Marriage across societies is a publicly acknowledged and supported sexual union which creates kinship obligations and sharing of resources between men, women, and the children that their sexual union may produce. I mean, it's literally just a legal distinction for, resource sharing. Like, I agree with kind of that statement of kinship obligations, and which is an odd thing to say. Like, because I wouldn't even suggest kinship obligations. That kind of suggests gender rules to me. But sharing of resources is pretty much it. Like tax law and resource distribution and whose children are these. That's kind of what marriage does. It is nothing about who can be sexually active with who and who can reproduce with whom. That's not included in the definition of marriage. By convention since the dawn of humankind. So they're pulling an argument of it's been done for a long time, therefore this is correct. By historic precedent and by accepted legal and social definition, the above definition has described the entity we call marriage. Recently, a small but vocal minority of our population, aided by a biased media, has waged a relentless campaign to radically alter this normative and natural social structure. Yeah, because we're proposing natural structure. It's what natural. What the fuck is a natural social structure? Social structures, by definition, are man-made or organism-made. Because there's different animals have their own different societal structures, but that's organism specific and organism determined. Like it's just funny the word of natural, that everything natural is good and anything unnatural is bad, and then also things that my religious institution does is natural, and what your institution does is unnatural. All institutions are unnatural. Calm down. By bending to the definition of the wants of the homosexual adults. So scary. If this campaign is successful, there will be no break as our society moves towards an era in which the institution of marriage will become meaningless. So if you allow two people who love each other to get married and to share their finances and to share their responsibility of their children, that's going to render the entire institution of marriage meaningless. It sounds like your definition is superficial then. If something that small can just disrupt the entire institution. This is just such a joke. Like, it's hard to seriously give commentary on this because of just how laughable the rhetoric is. The American College of Pediatricians is concerned about this movement and its predictable deleterious effect on our society, and in particular, its children. Have we witnessed this before? Of course we have. Many made the same mistake with respect to divorce and our children. Organized medicine. Even those groups founded to protect the health and well-being of children, supported by the media, promoted the concept that for children, Divorce was better than living in an unhappy household. Yeah, it actually is better. And they're saying unhappy in quotes to make the other side sound ridiculous, but oftentimes divorce is necessary to get people out of abusive relationships and to remove custody of children from abusive family members. And yeah, divorce is infinitely better than being abused. I shouldn't have to say this. We now know more than 20 years later that society, the family, and especially children have suffered from this social and professional endorsement of divorce. Furthermore, divorce rates continue to rise, and the quality of life for all parties involved, especially the children, has significantly declined. Yeah, now more people are getting divorced because it's more accepted that you be safe versus you be obligated to stay in a relationship that is harmful to you and dangerous. Yeah, that's not a problem. I will happily support divorce if it promotes a safer environment, for sure. And even I'll support it for people that just don't want to be together. Like, you shouldn't have to be forced to be in a relationship permanently with somebody that you don't want to be in a relationship with. That's your own business. The ACP recognizes that alternative parenting will happen, and we're aware of the challenge that this poses to children. When other professional organizations, however, encourage and endorse the less than optimum, non-intact household settings for the child rearing as the norm, the ACPs must speak out in defense of the children. Yeah, defense of the children that should stay within abusive households because divorce is bad, and we'd rather see them in an abusive household than in a gay household. Yeah, definitely optimizing safety for children. We will work with all parents to help them optimally raise their children. Except, no, you won't. You won't work with all parents because you won't work with queer ones because they're less than optimum. Because they're saying we will not, however, encourage any less than optimum household settings as being equivalent to the intact traditional nuclear family. We will not condone another social experiment. Yeah, suggesting that queer people are social experiments is genocidal language again. At the expense of physical, emotional, and social health of children. For this reason, the ACPs fully supports the Federal Defense of Marriage Act and any other legislation or societal measure that will encourage and defend the traditional mother-father nuclear family. This is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. Yeah, Blue Cat makes a good point. Better to have a divorce than to end up a murder statistic when the marriage's breakdown escalates to the extremes. Yeah, this is disgusting. People are dying because of this. Children are dying. Adults are dying. Lots of people are dying. And if the kid's trans, they definitely won't help optimally raise them. No, they'd rather have dead trans children than live trans children. This is genocidal. This is a hate group. This is a hate group that gets away with pretending to be medically sound and pretend that they have everyone's best interest at heart. They do not. They are a religious organization. They are a political lobbying campaign that opposes people's right to exist and people's right to have a safe family and a safe living environment. It's disgusting. They do not care about children at all. They care about their own religious institutions more than they care about the children. And they should not be allowed to be tax-free for this. They should not be allowed to help convince lawmakers of what they should do. This is disgusting. And then they got their position statements, and it's funny because they only have one reference. They only have one source for this, which is 21 conclusions from the social sciences about why marriage matters, which I kind of want to look this up because It's from the Institute for American Values in 2002. So it's a very outdated study from a clearly biased. Is this even a journal? I'm curious. Institute for American. Yeah, this just like I thought, this is not a journal. This is not a journal. Let me try to find their actual website. I can't even find a specific website for them. Did they get dismantled? I hope they got dismantled. That'd be fantastic if it did. Because I can't find them anywhere. I can just find articles from them. Yeah, it's no longer a thing. Their motto was "Renew Civil Society." It's a New York City think tank focused on family and social issues. It's not a journal, and that's the only thing that they cited here. Yeah, very evidence-based. And from 2002 nonetheless, when everything else, all of their other statements are from, like, at latest 2020. And so they didn't even update, or 2021. So they haven't even updated any of that. They don't care about science. Sexuality issues of youth. Oh, they don't have. This is, yeah, I can just read off some of these titles. Psychotherapy for unwanted homosexual attraction among youth. So they are advocating for, at least, let's read it though to see if they're actually advocating for conversion therapy. Although there are no scientific studies which evaluate psychotherapy for unwanted homosexual attraction among adolescents, there are 4 studies that examine sexual orientation change efforts among adults, which have been referenced to support legislative efforts to ban minors from receiving psychotherapy for UHA. So, therefore, science does not support laws which prohibit minors with UHA from receiving psychotherapy in accordance with their personal goals and values. So they support conversion therapy explicitly here. They do not support the prohibition of conversion therapy. So this is, yeah. I don't even need to go into reading more about this. I'm disgusted. I'm absolutely disgusted. And they should not be allowed to lobby the way that they are. They should not be allowed their tax-free status for advocating for the literal genocide of minority communities. And I don't think we're going to read much more about this. I think we might be ending the episode here. I think maybe more of these issues we'll take into other episodes. We'll do I should go into these articles in more detail. And we don't have the time, I think, to really unpack all of this here. But it gives me a lot of ideas for some new episodes because I think we're going to do one about conversion therapy. That will be one that we do. We'll do one about abortion. We'll do one about we've done plenty about trans issues. We'll do more about trans issues. And then there was an article I was going to talk about, which actually of something that happened at my university, which we have a student organization at Midwestern University that is Medical Students for Choice, and it's a great organization. It helps med students get educational opportunities with Planned Parenthood and with other family planning clinics and teaches about sexual education and stuff, advocates for abortion education, all that stuff. It is evidence-based of an organization. It is secular, and it promotes the gold standard of medicine. So it's reasonable that a university would have a chapter of that organization because it upholds the values and upholds the data-supported medicine that is the consensus. And recently, an opposing group tried to get a club started on campus for medical students for life, which the difference is this one was purely, it wasn't an educational organization. It was purely for political influence, which is scary. And it's an organization backed by Focus on the Family, which is another hate group that promotes conversion therapy. And so they had clear religious backing to this organization and clear political intentions. And so several months ago, Med Students for Choice released a statement to the administration saying that they should not allow medical students for life to be on our campus because of the fact that, number one, they're a political lobbying organization that contradicts the gold standard of care and contradicts the science and is therefore not evidence-based and should not be promoted at an evidence-based institution of medicine. And also that it is clearly religiously affiliated and affiliated with hate groups. And unfortunately, just recently, so the student government had shut down approving, like they had not approved the club. They shut down attempts for the club to exist on campus, which was a great decision. I agree with their decision to do that. But the administration stepped in recently and approved of the club being allowed student funding, like as clubs at our organization, they get funding for their events, which means that essentially the university is allowing for funds to go towards that pro-life lobbying, which is unacceptable and very, very problematic. Yeah, the Hicker's bigotry is showing, absolutely. So unfortunately, that went through, and maybe I'll talk more about that in the future. Yeah, conservative student groups are very Sue happy, definitely. And that wasn't a huge part of today's topic, but I did want to mention that because it was so close to home for me and was kind of a reason why medical student organizations are important and why we need to care about these lobbying groups and why it's not just about free speech. Because yeah, you have the right to say whatever you want, but when you are opposing medical care, opposing gold standard medical care, and you're doing so through a legitimate academic institution that awards medical degrees, that is scary and it will cause harm. So it should be opposed, and that should not be allowed to happen. So ending on kind of that heavy note, lots of things going on this week. I think I've done a bunch of shows already this week, but tomorrow we have Nat One Heroes playing Rime of the Frost Maiden at 7 p.m. Central Time over on Twitch. And then on Thursday, I'm on the Transatlantic Call-In Show again with Arden on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Friday, we have Trivia Night on Twitch at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on Saturday, I don't know what my topic will be for this upcoming week for medical myths, but I'll think of one and I'll let you know. And then next Sunday, I believe I'm on Talk Heathen. I'm on Talk Heathen next Sunday. So everybody join me for all of those shows. And if you are in the audience and you are either a Patreon member, if you are a channel member, or if you are a Twitch subscriber. So if you are financially contributing to the channel and in one of those areas, you can go to either the Discord in the financial department and find the link there to the after show, or it's on the Patreon, or if you're a channel member, you can find the link to the after show there. But come hang out with us. It's going to be a good time. I think Phoebe's joining me in the after show as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to thank the patrons here: Regios, Jody L, Pharmacy Sabrina, Ellipsis, Jedi Indiana Jones, Tons of Mice, Steve Ferris, Haney Ball, and SG. Thank you for your support of the channel, and our lovely channel members, Rebus Wind and Lilypad LA. Thank you so much. I could not do this without you, and I hope to see you all in the after show. That's going to start probably in about 5 minutes after we go off the air. But I'll see you all next time. Stay curious, everybody.